Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were thought to be the quintessential Hollywood-Nashville love tale for almost 20 years. A country music singer and an Oscar-winning actress who beat the odds. But things were falling apart behind the red carpets and duets. Court papers show that Nicole filed for divorce after 19 years. Sources say she tried hard to save the marriage. He didn't wear his wedding ring or sing a love song for Nicole during his first public performance after the split. The words were changed in a way that made it seem like history had been rewritten. The picture of the golden pair is broken, and Nicole's side is finally coming out. We explore more closely at what made them so popular, and what caused one of Hollywood's most famous love tales to end. Nicole, the quiet dreamer who became a star in Hollywood. Nicole Mary Kidman was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, in 1967. Her parents were Australians who were living abroad at the time. Her dad, Anthony Kidman, was a clinical psychologist and biochemist, and her mom, Janelle, was a nurse and teacher. The family moved back to Sydney when she was still a youngster. She grew up in a home full of discipline and drive. Young Nicole was very bashful, unlike the brilliant, confident person she grew up to be. When called to speak in class, she would blush so much that her teachers thought she might not be confident. But that shyness was mixed with a strong imagination. She turned to acting to escape. She started with ballet, then moved on to acting classes, and then joined young theater organizations where she could let out the feelings she had trouble showing in real life. By the time she was a teenager, it was clear that she was quite talented. At the time, Australia's film industry was booming, and she took advantage of the opportunity to get parts in TV movies. Eventually, she was cast in the 1983 cult thriller BMX Bandits. Directors thought she was destined for more because of her porcelain beauty, height, and wide range of emotions. Hollywood started knocking towards the end of the 1980s. Nicole met Tom Cruise during this time, and he was her first great love and her first great heartbreak. They tied the knot in 1990 and became one of the most photographed couples in Hollywood. Nicole's marriage gained her fame, but it also hurt her. Tom's faith, Scientology, had a big impact on their marriage. She doesn't talk about those years in detail very often, but it's commonly known that when the marriage broke in 2001, she lost not only her husband but also primary custody of their two adopted children, Isabella and Connor. This cut hurt a lot. Later, friends said that Nicole felt that she had lost her role as a mother and was pushed to the periphery of her children's lives. The breakup would be one of the most painful things that had happened to a woman who wanted a family of her own. When she met Keith Urban later, she was determined to restore the dream of house and family that she had lost. Keith, the troubled dreamer who plays the guitar. Heath Lionel Urban was born in Whangarei, New Zealand, across the Tasman Sea, the same year as Nicole. When he was still a child, his family relocated to Queensland, Australia. It was there that his personality started to change, becoming restless and rebellious and always looking for a way out. Bob, his father, owned a convenience store, but he also loved country music. This kind of music isn't very popular in suburban Australia. He told little Keith to learn to play the guitar, and by the time he was 6, he was already playing. Country music gave him both a sense of who he was and a way to deal with his problems. But even though he was a great musician, his home life wasn't as good. He is said to have lived in a household that was always fighting and having money problems, which could have led to his lifelong desire for stability. He played in talent showcases in small bars when he was a teenager, which helped him develop not only his music but also his image as a brooding country outsider with a rock star's edge. He quickly quit school to focus on music full-time. Keith didn't have a plan B. He could only get out via music, but with the gift came demons. He was already trying drugs and alcohol by the time he was in his 20s. When fame came, it didn't calm him down. It made things even more chaotic. He relocated to Nashville in the early 1990s because he wanted to be famous. After years of hard work, he eventually broke through in 1999 with his self-titled American debut album. Keith became the new heartthrob of country music overnight. He was noted for his guitar skills, messy hair, and voice that dripped with desire. But in the background, the success was mixed with self-destruction. He had already gone to rehab a few times by the time he met Nicole in 2005. He was always afraid that his addictions would take away everything he had worked so hard to build. Nicole and Keith looked to come from opposite worlds on paper, one from Hollywood and the other from Nashville. The burden they carried was what actually brought them together. Nicole had scars from losing her family and a marriage that left her afraid of being controlled and betrayed. Keith was a man who had known both stardom and obscurity, but he never fully got over his need to hurt himself. When they finally met, both were at a crossroads in their lives. Nicole came out from her divorce stronger than ever. She won an Academy Award for The Hours and solidified her place as one of the best actors of her generation. But she was still emotionally raw and wanted stability after 10 years of chaos. Keith, on the other hand, was becoming a star, making a name for himself in the very competitive world of American country music. But the trappings of fame, like relentless touring, temptation, and the expectations of a business that values image as much as sound, were pushing him to the edge. He needed someone to ground him and make him believe in something more than the stage lights. When you look back, you can't help but see the signs. Keith's restless, addictive attitude was always going to clash with her need for control and stability. Their marriage held the possibility of healing. Maybe she might get back the family she had lost, and he could find salvation in her steadfastness. But it also had the potential to cause problems in the future. Nicole thought that being with another famous person came with its own set of risks. Her marriage to Tom Cruise had shown her how harsh the public eye could be. But with Keith, she sensed weakness, even frailty, and it made her want to protect him. She was both a muse and a mirror for him. Her discipline and success showed him how unstable he was, but her love gave him the chance to become the man he had always wanted to be. Their early years had shaped them into complicated, hurt people. When they eventually met in 2005, it felt like it was meant to be. But really, it was more like volatile chemistry, paths crossing, and fairy tale romance. When Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban finally met in 2005, it was reported as a story right out of a Hollywood movie. Two Australians, both famous around the world, both born in the same year, and both have been through a lot of hard times. They crashed into each other just when their lives seemed ready for a fresh start. The crimson carpets and shiny publications made it seem like their encounter was meant to be. But deep down, the connection was less about fate and more about two hurt people holding on to the prospect of being saved. The initial spark happened during the Gue de USA Gala in Los Angeles in January 2005. A party for Australians who work in Hollywood. Nicole had just gone through a stormy divorce with Tom Cruise, but by then she had rebuilt her career and was an Oscar-winning actress. Keith, on the other hand, was a rising star in Nashville whose records were starting to appeal to a wider audience. She later said that when they first met, she didn't think he was interested. He was nice, but he didn't say much. He didn't call her for months after they gave each other their numbers. Years later, she said that his lack of interest at first almost ruined the love story before it even started. But when he finally got in touch, things clicked. Once they started dating, things went rapidly. They were seen together in May. She was telling people in interviews that he was the man who had swept her off her feet by the end of the year. He was freedom for her, who had lived through the stifling scrutiny of her marriage to Tom. He was passionate, rough, and unrefined in every way that Tom Cruise wasn't. Keith saw her as a real person, a lady, and the kind of stabilizing force he had never known. By November, he was strolling red carpets with Nicole not only as her date but as her companion. It was clear that they had chemistry. And the press really liked the two of them. The golden children of Australia have found each other in the US. In June 2006, a little over a year after they started dating, they got married in a big ceremony at the Cardinal Soretti Memorial Chapel on Sydney's Manly Peninsula. She donned a Balenciaga dress with a dramatic veil, and he looked like a romantic troubadour with his long hair. The guest list was full with famous people from Hollywood and country music, but the true story was how close the event was. She is said to have walked into the chapel by candlelight, holding back tears, and he sang to her during the reception. For admirers, it was the ideal climax to both of their terrible pasts. Nicole had been in a relationship with a man who was quite controlling, but now she had discovered a man who seemed to love her no matter what. Keith, on the other hand, had found peace in the arms of one of the most famous actresses in the world. Sadly, life wasn't as perfect as fairy tales. The earliest signs of trouble. Keith went to rehab for drinking too much just 4 months after the wedding. It was a huge blow to their happiness as newlyweds. Nicole had just completed drafting her thank you notes when a catastrophe hit her. The tabloids jumped on the story, saying she had married a time bomb. The relapse was embarrassing for him. He had promised that her love would keep him steadfast. But it didn't take long for his old tendencies to come back. Nicole, who always kept her private life private, chose loyalty above shame. She was there for him, going to rehab with him. And not letting the press watch her fail, which would have made them happy. He later said in interviews that she had saved his life during that time. But people who worked there saw something more complicated. She couldn't restore her marriage with Tom, so she was now putting herself into the role of healer and protector with Keith. She believed in him and in second chances. That loyalty would be a big part of their marriage. For better or for worse. Even though things didn't start off well, the pair spent the next few years building their reputation as one of Hollywood's few long-lasting romances. She kept getting big parts in movies, including Australia, which was a huge hit, and Rabbit Hole, which got great reviews. At the same time, he became one of the biggest stars in country music. Touring all the time and receiving awards, like several Grammy Awards. They were loving in public. She once said that he was the one who brought her back to life. Keith thanked her a lot during award events, and occasionally he even cried. There was tension underneath the carefully chosen image. He spent a lot of time on the road for work, and she often filmed in other countries. They did their best to make it work. Even making rules like not being apart for more than a few weeks at a time. But many who worked there said that their schedules often didn't match up. Nicole, who was very hurt by being apart from Isabella and Connor Cruz, held on to the idea of family. She threw herself into being a mom when she and Keith had their first daughter, Sunday Rose, in 2008, and then Faith Margaret in 2010. He loved his kids very much, but had a hard time finding the right balance between being a father and living the busy life of a touring artist. Later, they were able to sell themselves as the cure for Hollywood's pessimism. Interviewers praised them as proof that real love could last through celebrity. Pictures of the family at the airport, with her holding the daughters and him carrying the baggage behind her, made the family seem even closer. But deep down, their link had grown weaker. He was always having trouble staying sober. Her need for stability sometimes turned into control, and friends said that the couple's conflicts went deeper than either of them would admit. But they kept on, determined to keep the fairy story alive. Their first few years together were full of the rapid intensity of falling in love, being married almost away, and getting through the problem practically right away. Because of that zeal, they never really stopped to deal with the flaws that were emerging in their foundation. They kept up the act for almost 20 years, with a redeemed bad guy and his patient savior. No one understood at the time that the same whirling energy that had brought them together would later tear them apart. The fairy tale was always weak and based on hope and performance, just like real life. But the stress was getting worse. Love when things are hard. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban had been married for 10 years when they had already been through more ups and downs than most couples would ever have to deal with. Rehab just a few months after the wedding, extended separations because of work, and the stress of parenting 2 kids in the public glare all added to the burden. But for years, they were a sign of strength. In the middle of the 2010s, rumors about tension started to spread more often. There were rumors of fights about timetables, Keith's lifestyle, and even Nicole's intensity. The couple always rejected the rumors, and they often spoke out together in interviews. Nicole would often say that they had never been stronger, and Keith would agree, calling Nicole his rock. But fractures always seemed to show, no matter how well you hide them. Friends of the couple said that she had become tired of carrying the emotional weight of his problems. She liked his art, but she was anxious about how he was doing mentally. Keith, on the other hand, occasionally acted strangely when he was depicted as the person who needed to be saved. He supposedly wanted to be her equal, not a project. Their differences were what kept them together for so long and what drove them apart. Nicole liked how weak he was, but she was also afraid of it. He liked how strong she was, but thought it was too much for them. Their marriage was always a fight between saving and resisting, between passion and tiredness. The story that the public told about them stayed the same. They were the love story that beat the odds. Few people recognized how much work it took to keep up the illusion or how much of their private energy went into keeping up the front. They had a lot of pressure to live up to their image. They weren't just a couple. Fans who wanted to believe that love could last through addiction, distance, and fame saw them as the embodiment of hope. Every picture and every public act became part of the story. But as history shows, mythology can be both uplifting and depressing. Nicole and Keith were stuck in their own fairy tale. Their differences were particularly clear when they were raising their girls. Nicole, who had been through a lot of problems in her own family, stressed the need of routine, stability, and keeping her kids away from the craziness of celebrity. Keith was more lenient and seemed like the fun father. Nicole and her husband both loved their girls, but insiders said that Nicole sometimes felt like she was being undercut and that he sometimes felt like he wasn't serious enough. These conflicts weren't as big as the media wanted them to be. They were quieter splits, the kind that slowly erode trust and closeness. The tabloid whispers and then, finally, divorce. As the 20s began, tabloids started to guess that the marriage was falling apart. There were stories about fights, time spent apart, and Keith's old demons coming back to haunt him. Nicole and Keith both denied the rumors, and they were often seen together soon after a story came out. Nicole would say in interviews that they had never been stronger, and her cool tone put skeptics at ease. There was some truth to the rumors, though, despite the protestations. Keith kept fighting to stay sober. There is no proof that he fell as far as he did in the past, but people close to her said that her worry of relapse never really went away. She stayed on guard, which sometimes made her tense. Keith might have felt like he was being watched and doubted all the time, even when he was doing everything right. Nicole, on the other hand, was tired of always being the anchor. She loved him, but she wanted things to be more even. Desired a marriage where she didn't have to worry about the next storm all the time. The disparity between their private and public personalities may have been the most telling evidence of their problems. Privately, they were drifting, fighting, and going around problems that hadn't been settled. They stuck to the fairy tale in public. Their appearances on the red carpet grew more and more essential, as if they were putting on shows not for the cameras but for themselves, reminding each other in the world of the love tale they used to believe in. At occasions, Keith would hold Nicole's hand tightly and kiss her shoulder and speak in her ear. She smiled, calm, but those who saw her thought her grin looked more prepared than real. The love seemed true, but it was forced. Like performers who had learned their lines a long time ago. Every marriage has unspoken grudges, but in their case, those grudges become louder as the years went by. Nicole is said to have hated how much he needed her strength and how much he needed her to be both his wife and his savior. He didn't like how she could control him, their kids, and even herself. And their image with military-like accuracy. Friends of the couple said that their relationship was always one of negotiation. He wanted to be free, but she wanted to be safe. He wanted excitement, while she wanted calm. Neither was wrong, but their needs didn't always match up. The whispers got louder in 2023 and 2024. Sources in celebrity magazines who didn't want to be named said they were living separate lives, even though they were together. The allegation started to make sense when she started going to events alone and the paparazzi started taking pictures of her. He was seen on tour without his wedding ring, and they both avoided talking about each other in interviews. The couple, on the other hand, didn't believe the story of collapse. Nicole often said that getting married took a lot of work. An admission that seemed small but also quite revealing. He would say that she was all he needed. Even if his statements started to sound like lines from an old script instead of something he said on the spot. Still, every unraveling has a point where it all falls apart. And theirs happened in the summer of 2025. The gaps had grown into big holes by then. She was spending more and more time with her girls. Getting away from the circus of conjecture and back to family. At the same time, he pushed himself into music, touring more and more and putting his feelings into performances that were sometimes almost like confessions. People who know them well say the choice to break up wasn't a big deal. There was no one big scandal or last fight. Instead, it was the creeping realization that they were no longer helping each other. Nicole was heartbroken but determined. She knew she couldn't be both a partner and a caretaker anymore. Keith decided to leave because he was tired of Nicole's high expectations. When she ultimately filed for divorce in late September 2025, saying that they couldn't get along, the public gasped. But for those who had been paying attention, the end felt like it was going to happen. These two had been working on one of Hollywood's most beloved storylines for almost 20 years. It was a story of redemption, strength, and love that lasts. The words on the legal papers were short and to the point, irreconcilable differences. But they held the weight of a much more complicated story. What happened next was not merely a legal separation, but a very public unmasking, with each move showing the naked truth of a marriage. It had been having a hard time staying alive for a long time. Nicole filed in Davidson County, Tennessee, where the couple owned a house with their family. The paperwork was simple, even boring, yet it had big effects. She was leaving after 19 years of marriage, 2 kids, and a lot of promises of love that would last forever. People close to her said that she had been thinking about the choice for months. She had worked hard to keep the family together, especially for their daughters, Sunday and Faith. But one acquaintance said she knew she couldn't salvage both her marriage and herself. For years, she had been the one who kept things stable, his anchor against addiction, and the one who planned things in a relationship that was often full of chaos. In the end, she opted to protect herself. The papers made it plain that she wanted primary residential custody of the girls, with him having the right to make decisions with her. Both sides gave up spousal and child support, which shows that they had been keeping their finances separate for a long time. Heath's reaction was far louder, more visceral, and more obvious than her filing, which was a silent sign that the relationship was over. He was seen just a few days after the divorce news emerged, and most significantly, he didn't have his wedding ring on. If that wasn't evident enough, he changed the words to 2 of his most famous songs at his first performance since the divorce. At his concert in Pennsylvania, he turned what could have been just another stop on his High and Alive world tour into a public reckoning with his personal life that had a lot of people talking. Showing a storm of feelings to thousands of fans. He was performing for the first time since announcing his breakup from Nicole Kidman after nearly 20 years of marriage, and he spent no time letting everyone know that this was going to be more than just a regular country set. He walked onto the stage without his wedding ring, which was a meaningful move that the audience noted. And all night long, his actions went from rage to grief to a weirdly sweet sense of nostalgia. The moment that got the most gasps was during his 2004 breakup song You'll Think of Me, when he changed the line "Take your space and take your reasons" to "Take your venomous, take your unreasonable reasons." Many people thought this was a thinly veiled dig at Nicole and the end of their marriage. This angry outburst was very different from the image he let play during Heart Like a Hometown, which showed pictures of him and their 2 teenage daughters in a slideshow. It seemed like he was reluctantly acknowledging his family even though their ties were falling apart. Fans also saw that he took The Fighter off his set list completely. A song from 2016 that is thought to have been directly inspired by his relationship with Nicole and is often performed with her in mind, showing that he was trying to erase their shared history from his performances. He talked honestly about his childhood between songs, remembering how his parents pushed him to quit school to pursue music. It was as if he wanted to remind himself and the audience of the passion that had driven him long before fame, marriage, and controversy. The ups and downs of emotions didn't stop there. There was a lot of talk about his rumored relationship to younger guitarist Maggie Baugh, who wasn't there that night, but her shadow still hung over the performance because viral footage of him singing to her with changed lyrics at prior gigs had come back online. This absence, along with the alterations he made to his set list, only added to the intrigue and drama surrounding his personal life. By the end of the night, it was evident that his show had become more than just a concert. The media atmosphere changed right away when Keith filed for divorce and had a dramatic concert. The tabloids loved the drama, painting Nicole as the wronged woman who had finally had enough. Keith was given the role of the sad case, a man whose demons and inability to meet her needs drove him to ruin. Fans picked sides and analyzed every word he sang and every look she gave him in public. Nicole felt like she was suffocating under the spotlight again. She had filed quietly, wanting to keep things low-key, but his movements on stage made it hard to keep things private. She had to answer not with words, but by carefully planning her public appearances. Weeks later, at a film festival, she showed up without her wedding band. She was still calm, but her eyes showed how unhappy she was. The subject of family was at the center of the divorce. Nicole's marriage to Tom Cruise was still painful because she had lost Isabella and Connor. She was resolved not to let Sunday and Faith repeat what had happened before. The divorce papers made it plain what she wanted. The girls would mostly stay with her, which would help keep things stable during times of trouble. Keith has also said yes without much trouble, according to reports. Because of his touring schedule and erratic lifestyle, he is not as good at parenting every day. But many who knew him said he was heartbroken by the deal. A source said that Keith loves those girls and giving up primary custody wasn't because he didn't love them. It was about the actual world. Nicole has been hiding out with her girls and job since the filing. Someone took a picture of her in Nashville holding hands with Sunday and Faith. Her expression was calm, but her body language was defensive. Survival for her involves paying attention to the things she can manage, including her kids, her job, and her own health. Keith, on the other hand, has been putting all of his energy into music. His presentations are so exciting that each one is like a therapy session. Fans said that his shows were like heartbreak on display, and he cried throughout several songs. People liked him because he was vulnerable, but that also highlighted the truth that Nicole had chosen to go. What do you think of their divorce? Please tell us in the comments below. Thanks for tuning in. To watch more fun videos, click the play button on the video on your screen. Also, don't forget to hit the bell, like, and subscribe so you know when a new video comes out.